There's something quietly exhausting about human relationships, isn't there? Sometimes it's not the big arguments or the dramatic betrayals that drain us. It's the small, everyday moments. It's a misunderstood text message. It's the cold reply. It's the feeling of being unheard, unseen, or unappreciated by people we deeply care about. And what's even more surprising is that no matter how kind, patient, or loving we try to be, problems with people still seem to find their way into our lives. But here's the truth. Even during the time of the Buddha, over 2,500 years ago, people struggled with the same issues. Conflict, misunderstanding, ego, and hurt feelings were as real then as they are today. The Buddha didn't promise us a life without difficult people, but he did leave behind a wisdom so powerful, so timeless, that it can completely transform the way we handle those challenges. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about in this video. 8 powerful Buddhist tips that can help you solve problems with people in a way that doesn't just protect your peace, but actually deepens your inner strength and understanding. Because when you apply these Buddhist teachings, you start to realize the real solution isn't about changing other people. It's about changing how you show up, how you respond, and how deeply rooted you are in your own calm and clarity. So if you're tired of feeling emotionally drained by people, if you're ready to learn what Buddhist wisdom teaches about solving everyday conflicts with grace and peace, stay with me till the very end of this video. Every single tip we're going to talk about builds on the previous one. Each part of this video is like a stepping stone towards becoming a calmer, wiser, and freer version of yourself. And trust me, the last thing you want is to skip a part and miss the exact lesson that could be the answer you've been searching for. And if you appreciate what we're doing here, creating a space where ancient Buddhist wisdom meets everyday life, there's a simple, completely free favor I'll ask of you. Hit that subscribe button. It means more than you know. It helps this message reach more people who might just need it today. So settle in, stay with me till the end, and let's walk this path of understanding and peace together, just as the Buddha taught. Sometimes it feels like dealing with people is the hardest part of life. It's not the tasks, the deadlines, or even the challenges life throws our way. It's the human side of things that really tests us. The misunderstandings, the judgments, the words that hurt more than they should. And what's strange is how easily all of this builds up quietly in the background of our daily life. A harsh comment here, a cold silence there, a little disappointment that lingers far longer than we want it to. Slowly, without even realizing it, we begin to carry this invisible weight, a heaviness in our chest, in our mind, in our heart. And most of it, let's be honest, doesn't even belong to us. But here's something most people forget. This isn't just a modern problem. It's not because of social media or busy schedules or the fast-paced world we live in. Even in the time of the Buddha, over 2,500 years ago, people were struggling with the same emotional noise. The Buddha saw it clearly, that much of human suffering doesn't come from what happens outside of us, but from how we react, how we attach, and how we cling to the words, opinions, and actions of others. And in his wisdom, he showed a different way of living, a way of moving through this noisy, complicated world without losing your inner peace. What makes Buddha's teachings so powerful is that they begin with self-awareness. The very first step isn't about fixing others or changing the world around you. It's about noticing what's happening within you. How quickly do you react when someone speaks unkindly? How deeply do you absorb someone else's bad mood? How often do you replay a small moment of conflict in your head, like a movie you can't stop watching? Buddha taught that the mind is like a garden. What you plant and what you water will eventually grow. And if we constantly water the seeds of irritation, anger, and hurt, our mind will naturally become a restless, tangled place. This is the noise that divides us, not just from others, but from ourselves. Because when we're caught in resentment or frustration, we lose connection with our own calm, our own clarity, and even our own joy. We stop seeing people as they really are, the fellow human beings with their own struggles, their own karma, their own pain. Instead, we start seeing them only through the lens of what they've done to us or how they've made us feel. And that creates distance, emotional distance, spiritual distance, and sometimes even physical distance. But the Buddha offered a beautiful solution: presence, being fully aware of what's happening inside you without judgment, watching your thoughts without becoming trapped by them, noticing the rising of anger without letting it control your actions. In Buddhism, this practice is called mindfulness, and it's more than just a trendy word. It's the path to freedom, because the more mindful you become, the less power other people's noise has over you. The Buddha also reminded us that everything in this world is impermanent, even our emotions, even our conflicts. What feels unbearable today might feel small tomorrow. What hurt us deeply a week ago might slowly fade into the background if we stop feeding it with attention. This simple truth softens us. It gives us space to breathe. It reminds us that we don't have to carry every harsh word or every misunderstanding forever. There's a quiet kind of suffering that many people carry, often without even realizing it. It's that constant tension in your heart every time you wonder, did I say the wrong thing? Or, do they like me? Or, what will they think of me now? It's exhausting, isn't it? Living like you're on stage all the time, performing for the approval of others. But here's the hard truth. No matter how kind you are, no matter how generous or careful or loving you try to be, not everyone will like you. And that's not a sign that you've failed. It's a sign that you're human. In the teachings of Buddha, there is a beautiful reminder that perfectly captures this reality. The Buddha once said, "There is no one in this world who is liked by all and hated by none." Not even the Buddha himself, with all his wisdom and compassion, could escape criticism or dislike from others. Some admired him deeply. Others rejected him completely. So if even someone like the Buddha wasn't universally loved, why are we holding ourselves to that impossible standard? You see, the craving to be liked is deeply tied to attachment, one of the roots of suffering that Buddha often spoke about. Attachment doesn't just mean clinging to material things. It also means clinging to opinions, to praise, to being seen in a certain way. And the danger of this is that it pulls us away from our true nature. We begin to shapeshift to please others. We hide our real thoughts. We silence our real feelings. We smile when we want to cry. And all for what? Temporary approval that disappears the moment we no longer fit into someone else's expectations. Buddhism invites us to step back from this endless cycle. It asks us a powerful question. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when there is no applause? That's where real peace lives, not in being liked by everyone, but in being deeply true to yourself, anchored in your own values, whether people understand you or not. And there's another layer to this that's easy to miss. The more we chase approval, the more we give away our power. Think about it. When your happiness depends on someone else's opinion, you become their prisoner without even knowing it. They don't have to control you. You've already handed over control by needing their validation. But the Buddha taught that freedom doesn't come from changing other people. It comes from changing your relationship to their opinions. It comes from realizing that other people's thoughts about you belong to them, not to you. Let me share with you a powerful Buddhist reflection that helps with this. Praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, they come and go like the wind. To be happy, rest like a great tree in the midst of them all. Isn't that beautiful? Imagine being like that tree, rooted, steady, unmoved by passing storms of praise or criticism. People may like you today and dislike you tomorrow. They may praise you now and blame you later. But the tree doesn't dance for every wind. It stays grounded in its own truth. And the irony of all this is that when you stop trying so hard to be liked, when you start being fully and unapologetically yourself, you naturally begin to attract the right kind of people into your life. People who respect your honesty, people who value your energy, people who love you not for who they want you to be, but for who you really are. And isn't that what we all want in the end? Fewer masks, less pretending, more truth, more peace. There's something powerful about words that we often underestimate. A few sentences, spoken or even thought silently in our minds, can change the course of a relationship, uplift a heart, or cause years of pain. And that's the thing, so many of the problems we face with people, whether they're strangers or those closest to us, often come down to words. What was said, what wasn't said, what was misunderstood. In Buddhism, the Buddha placed such a deep emphasis on this that he made it one of the key limbs of the Noble Eightfold Path, right speech. But what many people don't realize is that this teaching isn't just about how we talk to others, it's also about how we talk to ourselves. Let's start with the outer layer first, our communication with others. Right speech in Buddhism is defined as speaking in ways that are truthful, gentle, purposeful, and timely. This means we avoid lying, harsh speech, gossip, and idle chatter. It sounds simple on the surface, but if we're honest with ourselves, how often do we fall into these habits without even noticing? Maybe we say something sharp because we're irritated. Maybe we stretch the truth just a little to protect ourselves. Maybe we talk about someone behind their back, convincing ourselves it's harmless. The Buddha warned that this kind of speech creates unnecessary suffering for others and for ourselves. And the thing about unskillful speech is that once it's released, it can't be taken back. Like throwing a stone into a pond, the ripples keep moving outward long after the impact. But right speech isn't about being passive or silent either. It doesn't mean you never speak your truth. In fact, the Buddha encouraged clear, honest communication, but with compassion. It's not what you say that causes harm, it's how you say it and why. When your words are rooted in kindness and clarity, even difficult conversations become an opportunity for connection rather than conflict. So next time you feel tension rising, pause. Ask yourself, is what I'm about to say true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? These three questions, rooted in Buddhist wisdom, can transform the entire energy of a conversation. Now let's look inward, because right speech also applies to the way we talk to ourselves. And let's be honest, sometimes we say things to ourselves we would never say to another person. We criticize, we replay past mistakes, we label ourselves as not good enough, not worthy, not lovable. The Buddha taught that all beings deserve compassion, and that includes you. The inner voice we carry becomes the lens through which we experience the world. If that voice is harsh, the world feels harsh. But if that voice is patient, understanding, and forgiving, life begins to feel softer, more spacious. So, what can you do to practice right speech within your own mind? Start by listening. Really pay attention to your inner dialogue. When you catch yourself speaking to yourself in a way that's cruel or demeaning, stop. Don't judge yourself for it. Just recognize it. And then gently replace it with a kinder thought. Even something as simple as, I'm doing my best right now, or it's okay to make mistakes, can begin to rewire the way you relate to yourself. The Buddha reminded us that our words and thoughts are seeds. What you plant today will grow tomorrow. Plant bitterness and bitterness will grow. Plant compassion and your whole life will slowly begin to bloom with peace. Whether you're speaking to a friend, a stranger, or silently to your own heart, your words have power. They can either build bridges or burn them. They can wound or they can heal. And when used with awareness, they become one of the most beautiful forms of mindfulness in action. Sometimes the things people say or do can cut deeper than we expect. A careless comment, a cold shoulder, a moment where someone completely ignores the effort we put in. And without even realizing it, we carry that wound around all day, replaying it, analyzing it, and wondering what we did wrong. It's like we wrap ourselves in their judgment and wear it as our identity. But here's something the Buddha taught that completely shifts this mindset. Not everything is about you. In fact, most things aren't. People act from their own perceptions, their own suffering, their own karmic patterns, and their reactions are often reflections of them, not you. When the Buddha spoke about the nature of the self, he taught that the self we defend so fiercely is actually not fixed. It's not this solid, unchanging thing. It's a collection of experiences, thoughts, feelings, and perceptions that are always shifting. So when someone criticizes us or acts out, we don't need to take it as a personal attack on some sacred, permanent self, because that self is already an illusion. This idea is freeing. It means we can stop personalizing every interaction. It means we don't need to carry other people's projections as if they define us. Now think about it. How many times have you lashed out at someone, not because of them, but because of something else entirely? Maybe you were overwhelmed, anxious, insecure, or just having a rough day. The same is true for others. People project their inner storms outward, and if we make the mistake of catching every storm that passes through, we'll constantly feel tossed around by life. The Buddha often reminded his followers that the key to peace is understanding, not just of ourselves but of others. He taught compassion, not only as a way of being kind, but as a way of seeing clearly. When we understand that someone's rudeness might come from their pain, or that their anger might come from fear, we no longer need to take it so personally. We see the deeper truth underneath the surface reaction. There's also a kind of humility in this practice. When we stop taking everything personally, we let go of the need to make ourselves the center of every story. Not everything that goes wrong is because of us. Not every silence is rejection. Not every glance is judgment. This doesn't mean we excuse hurtful behavior, but we learn not to absorb it. And that difference is everything. You can still set boundaries. You can still speak your truth. But you do it from a place of peace, not from defensiveness. You become the observer, not the reactor. The Buddha compared this to being like a rock. He said, "Just as a solid rock is not shaken by the storm, even so the wise are not affected by praise or blame." That's the goal. Not cold indifference, but stable awareness. You feel what you feel, but you're not swept away by it. You recognize when something stings, but you don't let it control your identity. You learn to pause and reflect. Is this really about me? Most times it isn't, and in that pause you gain back your power. There's a quiet kind of strength that most people overlook. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand attention, it doesn't come with applause or recognition. But when you truly understand it, when you start living it, it changes everything. That strength is patience. In the teachings of the Buddha, patience isn't weakness. It's not passive. It's not about enduring pain silently or pretending everything is okay. It's about being so deeply anchored in yourself that you can face life's storms without being thrown off course. It's about knowing that peace doesn't always come quickly, but it's always worth waiting for. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "Patience is the greatest asceticism." He wasn't just speaking to monks in the forest, he was speaking to all of us. Forgiveness takes patience. Healing takes patience. Understanding someone's point of view, especially when it clashes with our own, takes patience. And yet, how often do we rush? How often do we want people to change immediately, situations to resolve instantly, emotions to disappear on command? Our impatience doesn't make things better. It makes us suffer more. Think about it. How many times have you lost your temper, only to regret it later? How many conversations have turned into arguments because you couldn't wait that extra moment to respond calmly? When we're impatient, we act out of impulse. We say things we don't mean. We close doors that could have stayed open. But when we pause, When we create even a small space between what happens and how we respond, we reclaim our power. The Buddha taught that mindfulness is the key to that space. When we're mindful, we can observe the rising of frustration without immediately reacting to it. We notice the tightness in our chest, the heat in our face, the urge to speak harshly, and we just breathe. That single breath can make the difference between conflict and peace, between regret and understanding, between damage and healing. It's easy to be patient when things go our way, but real growth happens in the difficult moments, when someone disrespects you, when life feels unfair, when nothing seems to be moving fast enough. Patience in those moments is a form of spiritual strength. It's the ability to stay rooted in your values, even when everything around you is shaking. It's knowing that your inner peace is more important than proving a point or winning an argument. And let's be honest, patience is hard, especially in a world that moves faster than ever. We're taught to expect instant answers, instant success, instant results. But the most meaningful things in life don't happen instantly. They unfold slowly. A relationship doesn't heal in a day. A grudge doesn't dissolve in an hour. A deep understanding of someone's pain or perspective takes time. And when we give it that time, something beautiful happens. We begin to see people, not just their actions, but their wounds. We begin to forgive. We begin to soften. There's a quiet moment in every relationship where you realize you can't change people. No matter how much you explain, guide, or even beg, they're going to choose who they want to be. And when we're emotionally invested, that truth can sting. Whether it's a family member making the same mistakes over and over again, or a friend who refuses to see your side of things, it's easy to slip into frustration. You want to point out their flaws. You want to shake them awake. But here's where the Buddha offers a completely different path. One that isn't about controlling others, but about mastering yourself. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha says, one should first establish oneself in what is proper, then only should one instruct others. That line is powerful. It flips our usual thinking. Instead of trying to correct someone else, we're asked to reflect inward first. Are we living by the values we want others to embody? Are we truly practicing patience, compassion, and understanding? Or are we simply demanding it from others? The real influence doesn't come from preaching. It comes from presence, from how we show up consistently without needing applause. When you walk into a room and carry calm instead of criticism, people notice. Maybe not right away, maybe not in dramatic ways, but your energy shifts the dynamic. Your stillness becomes the anchor. It's not about superiority, it's about authenticity. And when people feel that in you, they begin to reflect. Not because you told them to, but because you've given them a living example of what's possible. The Buddha himself never forced his teachings on others. He simply lived them. And in doing so, people came to him, drawn by the depth of his peace. Being the example is about choosing humility over pride. It's resisting the urge to correct someone just to feel right. It's letting your life, not your lectures, speak for your values. This doesn't mean you let people walk all over you. It doesn't mean you stay silent in the face of harm. It means that when you act, you do so from a place of clarity and compassion, not ego. You hold your boundaries with kindness, not aggression. You speak your truth without needing to win. Think about the people who've impacted your life the most. Chances are they weren't the loudest. They weren't constantly pointing fingers or offering unsolicited advice. They were steady, present, and kind, even when things were difficult. That's the kind of influence that lasts. That's the kind of presence the Buddha taught us to cultivate, one rooted in mindfulness, integrity, and non-attachment. When you embody the values you believe in, you become a mirror. Not one that judges or exposes flaws, but one that gently reflects a better way of being. And this reflection invites others to rise, in their own time, in their own way. That's a real transformation. That's the ripple effect of living your truth. You might not see the results right away, but rest assured, your example plants seeds, seeds of awareness, seeds of growth. There's something deeply unsettling about how easily someone else's bad mood can become our burden. You wake up feeling okay, calm even, but then someone snaps at you, criticizes you unfairly, or brings their storm into your clear sky. And before you know it, your peace is gone. You're tense, you're hurt. You're replaying their words over and over, wondering why they treated you that way. It happens so fast and so often that we don't even realize it's happening. What we're doing, quietly, unconsciously, is absorbing someone else's pain and making it our own. But the Buddha gave us a powerful teaching that breaks this cycle. He once asked his disciples, "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The answer is simple. It still belongs to the one who offered it. The same is true of anger, blame, or unkindness. When someone throws negativity your way, it only becomes yours if you choose to pick it up. This insight isn't just poetic, it's deeply practical. Because most of our suffering in human relationships doesn't come from what others say or do. It comes from how tightly we hold on to it. When we internalize other people's negativity, we carry emotional weight that was never ours to begin with. And over time, that weight turns into resentment, anxiety, or even shame. But none of that actually belongs to you. If someone is angry with you, it might reflect their expectations, their disappointments, their past experiences, not your worth. If someone gossips about you, it says more about their state of mind than about your truth. The Buddha constantly reminded us to look deeper, not just at what's happening, but why it's happening. Most people act from their conditioning, not from clarity. Their actions are echoes of their own inner suffering. And this is where the practice begins, not in changing people, but in observing your own reaction. When you feel hurt or triggered, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, is this mine to carry? 9 times out of 10, it's not. This pause, this space between stimulus and response, is your doorway to freedom. You're not denying the pain, and you're not suppressing your emotions. You're simply choosing not to swallow someone else's poison. In Buddhist practice, this is the essence of mindfulness, learning to respond, not react. It means watching your thoughts arise like clouds, knowing they will pass. It means not clinging to every feeling or opinion that enters your space. You become the sky, not the weather. And when someone's negativity enters your life, you let it pass like a storm. You don't run into it. You don't invite it to stay. You let it move on without pulling you into its chaos. Over time, this practice builds something much stronger than just emotional avoidance. It builds resilience, the kind of quiet strength that doesn't shout or fight, but simply refuses to be disturbed. It's not about being indifferent. It's about being deeply rooted, like a tree that bends with the wind but doesn't break. And just like the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, who faced every temptation and distraction without flinching, you too can sit in the middle of other people's storms and remain centered. There's a moment in every conflict, and no matter how big or small, when we feel the urge to win, to prove we're right, to defend our pride. That voice inside says, "They shouldn't treat me this way. I deserve better. I need to say something." And that's where ego slips in, dressed as justice. It convinces us that protecting our pride is the same as protecting our peace. But according to the Buddha, that's exactly where our suffering begins. Not in what others do, but in how tightly we cling to our own sense of self, our identity, our rightness. The Buddha taught that the ego, this deep attachment to the idea of me, mine, and I am, is the root of so much conflict and pain. It blinds us, it makes us reactive, it convinces us that someone else's words or behavior can diminish our worth. But in truth, nobody can take away your inner dignity unless you hand it over. And that's what the ego does. It exchanges our inner calm for a moment of dominance, a quick win that never really satisfies. Because even if we win the argument, we often lose the connection. We lose our peace. We lose ourselves. But Buddhism offers us a different way, a path that's not about winning or losing, but about awakening. It teaches us to shift from ego to compassion, from pride to presence. The practice of metta, or loving kindness, reminds us that every person, even the one we're in conflict with, is a being who suffers, who longs to be happy, who carries unseen burdens. And when we remember that, we soften, not in weakness, but in wisdom. We begin to choose love not because we want to be seen as good, but because we know that love is what frees us from the prison of our own ego. Choosing love in the heat of the moment doesn't mean allowing others to walk all over us. It doesn't mean suppressing our boundaries or avoiding hard conversations. What it means is that we respond from clarity, not anger, from care, not control. When someone is harsh with you, the ego says, "Fight back." But the awakened mind says, "What pain might they be carrying that made them act this way?" That question opens up space. Space to respond with truth but without cruelty. Space to speak firmly but without becoming hard-hearted. That's the path Buddha walked. Not passivity, but deep, active compassion. And let's be honest, this isn't easy. When we're hurt, the last thing we want to do is open our hearts. But that's exactly why it's so powerful. It transforms us. It doesn't just make peace with others. It brings peace within. Because every time you choose love over ego, you're dismantling the inner walls that keep you isolated, bitter, or reactive. You're practicing what the Buddha called the highest form of protection, compassion that expects nothing in return. So how do we do this? Start small. When someone irritates you, pause. Take a breath. Before reacting, ask, "Is this my ego talking or my wisdom?" Reflect on the impermanence of emotions, how anger rises and falls like waves. Offer a silent wish. May this person be free from suffering. It doesn't mean you excuse harmful behavior, but it does mean you step out of the battlefield. You stop trying to prove your worth, and instead, you embody it. Not through pride, but through peace. There's a strange habit the mind has. It constantly wants to measure. You notice someone's calm nature and think, "Why can't I be like that?" You see how another person is loved, praised, or admired, and suddenly your own life feels smaller, less important. It happens quietly, almost automatically. Without realizing it, we start using other people as mirrors, but not the kind that reflect truth. These are distorted mirrors, shaped by illusion, ego, and insecurity. And here's the problem. The more we compare, the more we suffer. The Buddha knew this well. He taught that comparison is one of the many traps the ego falls into, a mental fabrication that leads us away from contentment and into craving, restlessness, and dissatisfaction. When we look at others only through the lens of comparison, we stop seeing them as people. We see them as symbols of what we lack, what we want, or what we're not. We turn someone's joy into our sorrow. Someone's success becomes our failure. This kind of thinking isn't just unkind. It's deeply unfair, both to ourselves and to the people we interact with. The Buddha taught that every person is on their own karmic path. They carry their own burdens, their own past, their own unfolding process of becoming. To compare your path to someone else's is like comparing the sun and the moon. They both shine, but at their own time. What's even more important to understand is that comparison blinds us from the lesson that each person can bring. In Buddhism, it's often said that every encounter is a teacher. The person who challenges your patience, a teacher. The friend who listens with deep presence, a teacher. Even the one who triggers jealousy or envy, also a teacher. But when we're stuck in the mindset of comparison, we miss the teaching. We're too busy measuring to see the meaning. too focused on how someone else is doing to reflect on what the moment is asking of us. The practice here then is mindfulness, not just of your breath or your body, but of your thoughts when they begin to compare. Notice when your mind whispers, "They're better than me," or "Why am I not like that?" Then gently pause. Ask yourself, is this helpful? Is this true? And most importantly, is this kind? As the Buddha said, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. That includes love in the face of your flaws, affection despite your insecurities. To truly see someone, without using them as a measuring stick, is an act of compassion. It opens the heart. It allows you to celebrate others without feeling less about yourself. It creates room for joy that is shared, not stolen. The next time you're tempted to compare, take a moment to breathe and return to presence. Ask, what is this person here to teach me? Maybe it's gratitude, maybe it's humility, maybe it's just the reminder that we are all walking different journeys, shaped by different causes and conditions. There's also beauty in embracing your own pace. The lotus doesn't bloom all at once. Some petals open earlier, some later, but all in perfect time. Just like that, your journey is unfolding. You don't need to rush it. You don't need to match it to someone else's rhythm, and you certainly don't need to lose your peace trying to be someone you were never meant to be. There's a strange illusion that most of us live under, the idea that we'll always have time. Time to make things right, time to reconnect, time to say the words we've been meaning to say. But one of the most profound teachings in Buddhism is the truth of impermanence. Everything changes, everything ends. The Buddha often reminded his disciples that everything we love, everything we hold dear, is temporary. Not to make us afraid, but to wake us up, to shake us gently and say, don't waste this moment. You see, when we're caught up in the busyness of life, our schedules, our goals, our endless to-do lists, we forget that the people in our lives are not permanent fixtures. We assume they'll always be around. We delay phone calls, we withhold forgiveness. We keep waiting for the right time, the perfect moment. But the truth is, we're not guaranteed another chance. That conversation you've been putting off? That small gesture of love you keep delaying? One day there won't be time, and when that day comes, we'll look back and realize it wasn't the arguments or the silence that mattered. It was the missed opportunity to love. In Buddhist practice, there's a deep emphasis on presence. Mindfulness isn't just about being calm or focused. It's about being fully here, with the people you care about. When you speak to your partner, your child, your parent, or your friend, are you really there? Or is your mind already on to the next thing? Are you scrolling through your phone, nodding out of habit, or actually listening? The Buddha taught that the quality of our relationships is rooted in awareness, not big words, not expensive gifts, just attention, just presence. And there's beauty in the little things. A smile, a shared meal, a moment of laughter over nothing. These are the threads that hold relationships together. Not the grand gestures, but the quiet, ordinary ones. But in order to see that beauty, we have to slow down, we have to look again, we have to stop treating the people we love like background noise. At the end of the day, it's not about having all the answers. It's about showing up with a heart open enough to listen, a mind quiet enough to see clearly, and a spirit grounded enough to choose peace even when it's hard. The Buddha never promised us an easy path, but he did offer us one filled with truth, compassion, and freedom. If this message spoke to you, let it stay with you. Let it change how you speak, how you forgive, how you show love. Thank you for being here, for being part of Buddhist journey with us. If you're ready to keep growing, keep learning, and keep walking this path of awareness and inner peace, watch one of the suggested videos on your screen now. Until next time, may you be safe, may you be well, and may your heart always return to stillness.